Good morning and welcome to Tuesday's English session. So yesterday we had a bit of a vocab collection day on flooding, which is our base of what our writing is going to be about this term. Now we're not going to need those notes in our first bit of writing that we're going to write guided together, but you might need them later on as the weeks go on in the term. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have a little bit of a planning session. And we're going to start this term with a non-fiction text. And we are going to look at an explanation text, which is something that we haven't quite looked at yet. Now, an explanation text obviously explains something. Now, it might explain how something works. It might explain how to do something. So on the screen in front of you are a few things on what you need to do to write a good explanation text. Now, you need to start with an introduction, like always. You need to be writing in the present tense, so it's an explanation on how to do something right now or in the future if it was to happen. We want technical vocabulary, which is something that we're going to have a look at collecting today. We want time connectives, like first you do this, next you do this, most importantly, things like that. You might want to include some diagrams just to make your explanation a bit easier to understand. We need a title, of course, on what you're explaining. And you might want to section it into text boxes, paragraphs. You might want some interesting facts and did you knows in that. That one is sort of optional as well as the diagrams. You can choose whether to do those or not. So what we're going to do first of all is have a look at an example one, of course, so that all of those points sort of make sense and that you can get an idea of what a explanation text looks like. Now, what we're going to be doing in our guided and independent writes for the non-fiction unit is we're going to be writing a series of how to survive explanation texts, thinking about extremities and survival. So I have written an example, how to survive a tsunami example. So we are going to follow all the same structures, the same paragraphs, the same points as the example one. So this one is up on the website for you to have a look at. What I want you to do is pause the video, go and find it and have a read through and pick out any important structural parts. So what is the structure of the text? Because that's what we're going to be focusing on. So pause the video and have a thorough read of it and then come back once you are ready and you have done that. Okay, so hopefully you had a read of that text so that you know what we are doing, what an explanation text looks like. Like always, I have got some pictures, some symbols that represent our writing. Now, as an explanation text pretty much does what it says, it explains something. You can't really summarize the paragraphs because the paragraphs are summarized by the title because that's the nature of an explanation text. So you sort of can scan through and look for the bit that you're looking for based on the subheading of each paragraph. So I haven't asked you to summarize like usual. I've just asked you to pick out key points. Now, what I've done is I've put a symbol that represents each paragraph. Now, they obviously go in order because this is the order that we're going to write them. But what I want you to do is try from memory, now that you've had a go at reading it, try and think about what each of these pictures represents. So have a pause of the video, have a think, maybe jot it down if you want to, and then come back when you are ready. Okay, so an explanation text begins with a definition of what it is, sort of an explanation, introduction of what you are explaining. So in example one, it was, what is a tsunami? So obviously, if you were doing an explanation text on how to bake a cake, you might begin with what actually is a cake, because that's taking into account somebody that may not have ever seen a cake or seen a tsunami. They might not know what it is. So we're going to begin, which is why it's a dictionary, like a definition of what you're explaining. So what is a tsunami was our example one. Then this picture is early warning signs, okay? And these fit with our how to survive explanation text. So there's not going to be early warning signs of cakes. But for our series of how to survive text, there will be. So we want early warning signs of the natural disaster. Then we move on to explain to people how you prepare for whatever disaster we're talking about, which is a checklist. So when you're preparing for things or you're planning to do something, sometimes you make a list. So we've got early warning signs and then things to do to prepare for it. Then I've got a clock to show a paragraph on what to do during that event. So at the current time that it's happening. And then the final paragraph is what to do after. So after all of this has happened, what do you do next, basically? So hopefully you managed to apply all of those to the text that we just looked at. So your task for today is to do some research and some planning. So like I explained, we are going to do a survival text sequence. Our first one is going to be guided. We're going to write it together with our example sentences and things like that. And it's going to be on how to survive an earthquake. Okay, so it's not to do with flooding because this is a guided one. When we move on, your independent one's going to be to do with flooding. So it's going to make a little bit more sense. But this one is like a practice run like we usually do, where we have a go at getting to grips with the structure and the vocabulary before we move on and do one by ourselves. So for the rest of today's lesson, I want you to research information on how to survive an earthquake. And I want you to have information that can go under each of these subheadings. Okay, the explanation tsunami text is on the website to help you, to give you some ideas. You can also leave this screen up with the symbols on to rejig your memory. So you want some bullet points for each one. Now it's really easy. You can find lots of things online because obviously lots of people do experience natural disasters like earthquakes and tsunamis. And so there's lots of information, reliable information on steps to choose to survive, to prepare for these sorts of things. So make sure that you are researching on reliable websites, but also there will be a lot of information out there. There might be too much information, so you might want to pick key points when you're thinking about a checklist or things to do after. So there might be loads of things that you can do, but maybe just summarize, pick the ones that you think are most important. So for this one, just bullet point notes, because we're going to start to write it over the next couple of days. Please don't just copy off the internet. It will be really obvious, because if I Google how to survive an earthquake and it comes up with what you've written, it will be pretty obvious that you've just copied it off. And also, you're not really going to understand what you're writing. So make sure that you write it in your own words, so that each child's explanation text is individual and important. So that is all I want you to do today, however long that takes you. Make sure you've got enough information for each of the bullet points, and then be sure to check back tomorrow and we are going to start writing it.